All right, let's take you now to Tel Aviv, where U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken's meeting with Israeli President Isaac Herzog.
As for the northern front, we are in a different situation. There we've been constantly attacked for a year already, and definitely in the last few weeks, constantly attacked from Lebanon. And that is why we have to take all the steps possible to eradicate the capabilities of Hezbollah, to move forward in preventing the onslaught against the citizens of Israel and the cities and towns. Their attacks with drones, missiles, rockets, their attack on the private home of the Prime Minister, it's all part of a major campaign, which at the end of it all is led and commanded in Tehran. And that is why, of course, a major answer has to be made towards Tehran. Thank you, Mr. Secretary, and welcome to Israel.
Well, Mr. President, thank you very much. It's always so good to be with you, to get your insight, to get your perspective, and I look forward to the conversation that we're about to have. We had a series of important meetings today with Prime Minister Netanyahu, with Defense Minister Gallant, Chief of Staff Levy, and as the President just said, I had the opportunity again to meet with the families of our hostages. And each and every time, it only reinforces what so many families in the United States and Israel and other countries have to live with every single day with their loved ones held in captivity. I believe very much that the death of Sinwar does create an important opportunity to bring the hostages home, to bring the war to an end, and to ensure Israel's security. And that's exactly what our conversations today focused on with our Israeli colleagues, including arrangements for the period following the end of the conflict. It's a conversation that I'll pursue in the region with other partners. But as the President said, this is, and we have to make sure that this is, a moment of opportunity to move forward. And that's the focus of all the conversations we're having here. We'll have an opportunity, I think, to speak more tomorrow at some point, as well as throughout the rest of this trip. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, President. Thank you.
Right, we were listening in there to the U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken following remarks being made there following a meeting with the Israeli President Isaac Herzog. But let's go now to Nour, and she's joining us from the Jordanian capital, Amman. And a reminder, that's because the Israeli government's banned Al Jazeera from reporting in the occupied West Bank and from inside Israel. Nour, we were just listening in there to Antony Blinken. It's his 11th trip to the region since the war began, but also notably his first since the war with Israeli troops entering Lebanon. Again, there's talk or perhaps some pressure for a ceasefire and humanitarian aid being let into Gaza. But how has Netanyahu at this point, the Israeli government, how has it responded?
Well, Famida, the Israeli government, in the statements that were put out following the meeting with Netanyahu and then subsequently with the Israeli Minister of Defense, really focused on the fact that the Israeli officials briefed Blinken on the progress of combat, as it was described in Gaza, but also in Lebanon, on the need to replace Hamas in Gaza, and also on the need to strike Iran hard. And that is, what was echoed, as we heard there, by the Israeli president, more or less. Blinken's messaging and all the statements coming out of the State Department focused on charting a different path forward, a diplomatic solution, an end to the war, and discussion on the day after, because really that answers the Israeli conditions, that it would only stop the war on Gaza, not just by releasing the captives, but by making sure that the political situation in Gaza is according to its conditions, namely that Hamas would no longer be able to govern there. So very different messaging coming out of both sides, and it doesn't really seem that the ceasefire per se was at the top of the agenda, perhaps more so the discussions of the day after.
Right, and then how are they looking at the issue of the hostages? There continues to be protests, this time outside the hotel where Antony Blinken has arrived. Are these protests similar to the ones we've been seeing for months now to get the hostages out of Gaza?
Well, they're much smaller, but they are the only voice at this point reminding the Israeli government and the American administration that these families continue to view reaching a hostage exchange deal as the priority and nothing else. And they've been trying in every way they can to make that message heard to Blinken, but also to the Israeli government. We even heard from Israel's leading human rights organization, B'Tselem, issuing a statement around the same time that the protest started, saying that the world should compel Israel to stop the war, to stop the slaughter in northern Gaza. They even said that all the tools, including economic, political, and military and otherwise, should be used to pressure Israel, which is really quite a remarkable statement of an Israeli organization telling the world they must pressure Israel, compel it to stop the war, because otherwise it just wouldn't.
All right, Nour, Odeh, thank you so much for that from Amman in Jordan.